today, just kind of rehashing from Monday. How much oxygen in millimeters of mercury is in the room right now? About 160. What was it? 159.6. That's 21% times 760, the barometric pressure. So again, rounding up, we're calling out about 160 millimeters of mercury. Second question, how much oxygen in millimeters of mercury is in our airway right now? That one's the 150 number. How did I get that? It's still 21% times, but it's barometric pressure 760 minus 47. Where does 47 come from? 47 is the water vapor pressure that I have to subtract from barometric pressure first. I'm left with 713, and 713 times 21%. So if I ask for where we are right now. How do you calculate minute ventilation? Tidal volume times respiratory rate or frequency. You'll always see it abbreviated as frequency, but don't get yourself confused. Frequency is respiratory rate, so same thing. And what does that tell us? That tells us, do the math, but what does it mean?
How much oxygen, how much you're breathing every minute.
Okay, so how much air we're breathing in or out in a minute. Now when we see it DE, typically the E represents exhale, so that's telling us how much air we just moved in the last minute. And so you'll find with our discussions and things like that, it's especially math, because there's going to be some math starting now and for the next several weeks. There'll be new formulas added almost every single day for a little bit, and then it slows down. It's wonderful that you can do the math. It's wonderful that you can solve the equation. Great, you're going to get that question right on the test. But my ultimate thing is, what does it mean? Those numbers have to be meaningful to us. It needs to mean something. On the board exam, could they ask you to solve a math equation, a math formula? On the board exam, yes, they could. Yes, they could. Do they allow you to use a calculator?
A simple one?
They do. You guys are so lucky. For 30 plus years, they never allowed a calculator. About 2 years ago, they allowed a calculator to be used on the board exam. Now, I always threatened, and again, I have nothing to do with the NBRC. They can care less what my opinions or my thoughts are. But for years, students would complain, and I get it. I was in your shoes too, and would complain, why don't they let us use a calculator? I could have a calculator at the bedside if I needed to do this. And nevertheless, but my fear was, when the day comes that they allow a calculator, are they going to ask more math questions? Knowing, well, you have a calculator, you're not going to do it all by hand. So I think I scared the you-know-what out of the class that year, that they were all, John, did you hear we can use calculators now on the test? I said, yeah, but the big if here, are they going to ask you more equations? They're not. They're not. Could they ask you any of these formulas we're going to be discussing from this point forward? Of course they could ask. But when push comes to shove, well, how many mathematical equations are they going to ask me on the board exam? I bet you can count them on one hand. Honestly, I bet you can count them on one hand. There's not a ton. We still have to learn them all. We still have to know them all, because they could ask any one of them, could be one of those 4 or 5 that they ask. But what they may do instead of asking you to solve a formula or solve a math problem, they're going to do the math for you. They're going to tell you the number, and the number has to mean something to you. You know, and again, I know we haven't talked about all the whens and whys and buts about it, but if I said someone's minute ventilation is 5 and somebody else's minute ventilation is 10, does that mean anything to you? I know we haven't talked about normal. Our normal minute ventilation right now is about 5. Ballpark, about 5. Plus or minus, but about 5. If you tell me later today my minute ventilation is 10, how would I have to be breathing? Fast and or deep, right? To get my minute ventilation that high. So again, I could solve a math equation, but if I don't really understand what that means, then they may get me on some of those questions, I know the formula, I can do the math, but I don't understand what the number means. That's all I'm getting at. So as we get to formulas and things like that throughout this semester, especially in this class, don't stress, don't worry. Yes, I'm going to ask those on test questions, and sure, I'm going to ask a decent number to make it worth your while to learn it and know it. But when you graduate and take the board exam, there's only going to be a handful of math questions you're going to actually have to solve. And they don't let you bring in your own calculator. They provide the calculator on the test itself. In the software of the test, there'll be a calculator that you can click. So again, save the trouble of solving the math, not having to do it by hand. Anyways, let's move and talk about, did I remove that? Scratch that. Nope, that's supposed to be gone. Pretend you didn't see it. Okay, let's move on. There's a duplicate slide here. Sorry, I meant to take that out. All right, so dead space. We've talked about dead space before. Does dead space participate in gas exchange? No. Any air that is found in a dead space area does not participate in gas exchange. There's no exchange between oxygen and carbon dioxide occurring. There is, however, 3 types of dead space. One we've actually kind of talked about, and I'll talk more about it now, but anatomical, alveolar, and physiological dead space. Sorry, this was that duplicate slide. That was the very first one. So if you have it, you can delete it. I meant to take it out, sorry. All right, so anatomical dead space. Found in the conducting airways. That's the air that's from our mouth, nose, all the way down, including the terminal bronchioles. If we follow the airways all the way down, what's the location called just after the terminal bronchioles? Those are the respiratory bronchioles. It's the respiratory bronchioles is the beginning of the gas exchange zone, gas exchange area. So dead space, this anatomical dead space, is everything from the terminal bronchioles all the way up to our mouth and nose. The gas that we inspire, the gas that ends up there, does not participate in gas exchange. And you and I can't really change our own anatomical dead space. It's our size, it's what our airway structure is. We can't alter that. However, it could potentially be altered through some sort of surgical intervention. What I mean by that is maybe they cut part of your airway out, maybe for the cancer patient or something like that. So in retrospect, okay, it could potentially be modified, but it would have to be something dramatic, like surgical intervention, removing part of a conducting zone or for part of the airway passage. Potentially, if we do a deep inhalation, cause the airway diameter to get a little bit larger, perhaps that could potentially increase our anatomical dead space, but it's small. It's a negligible number. It's not worth even concerning ourselves with. Same thing if we give a patient a bronchodilator medication that dilates the airway, technically, okay, there could be a little more space for wasted ventilation or dead space area, but it's still an extremely small, negligible number, not even worth noting here. So I always say clinically a person's anatomical dead space is considered constant. Now, how do we know what it is? Now, I know earlier when I mentioned and discussed, we brought up anatomical dead space, I said just grouping us all together being adults, our own anatomical dead space is approximately 150 milliliters. That's grouping every adult individual together as one. And of course, we are all different shapes, heights, sizes, etc. So probably a more accurate way to know someone's own anatomical dead space is not necessarily remembering that 150 number, even though for a generic answer that's fine. It's to relate it to the patient's lung size. Again, we're talking adults here, normal adult size. Meaning the anatomical dead space is approximately 1 milliliter per pound of our ideal body weight. All right, so 1 ml per pound of ideal body weight. And when I mean ideal body weight is not our necessarily actual body weight, but what ideally it is based on our gender and height. In time, we'll calculate how to figure that out, and we'll share how to calculate it, but not now. We have enough math we have to learn, let alone that one. But we will in time. We will in time calculating ideal. So my question here, and I didn't put it on the slide, so if you want to fill in the blank here, if a patient is 125 pounds, and that is, I should have put, that is their ideal body weight. Ideal body weight, 125 pounds, then how much is their anatomical dead space? 125. It's the exact same number. Don't make this math more complicated than it has to be. That means it's 125 mLs. All right, so ideal body weight in pounds, it's the exact same number, just change the units. Instead of pounds, now mLs for their own anatomical dead space. There's times we'll talk about how we can actually physically calculate that in the pulmonary function lab, but that's on another day and another discussion. So those things can be calculated, but that's anatomical. And is that number for you personally going to change? No. Even though in the next 20 years I gain 200 more pounds, that's not ideal, but my ideal body weight is always going to be the same unless somehow I get significantly shorter or taller. I don't think I'm changing height much here as I get older. But so my lung size will stay the same. So it doesn't matter what my actual weight is based on my ideal body weight. So 1 ml per pound of ideal body weight is going to equal our anatomical dead space. Now the next one, alveolar dead space. This is the air, this is the volume of air that is found in an alveoli that is not being perfused. When you hear the word perfuse, what does that mean? Blood flow, not getting blood flow. I'm sorry, Chad.
I want to go back real quick.
Sure.
So the approximate or estimated, what we've all been learning, is 150 dead space. But
Correct.
if the person is 220 pounds, then you're saying the dead space is 225?
If 220, you said 225 pounds?
Uh-huh.
If their ideal body weight is 225.
Oh,
And their
ideal body weight. So based off
ideal-
of the body mass
ideal
index?
Yes, their ideal
Okay.
body weight, not actual body weight.
Okay.
And I know, and it's probably not going to be this first test, but in the future, I'm going to give you a patient, I'll give you a patient height and weight, what it actually is right now, but when you look at it, you may want to say, I don't know if that's ideal. I don't know if that's what their ideal body weight is. In time, we'll know how to calculate it, so again, we're not ready for that just yet. But don't get confused, or don't fall for, well, their actual weight is this, doesn't mean that's ideal for
Right.
them, okay? So in those instances, we're gonna have to figure out what their ideal body weight is. Or maybe I give you the ideal body weight for a patient. But I know when I try to be tricky with that sort of question, I don't tell you ideal because I want you to figure it out on your own. Like I said, we're not gonna worry about that calculation just yet. That's later.
Okay, well, I'm glad I asked though, because I...
Oh yeah, that's fine, that's fine. But it's not their actual weight. It's not their actual weight, it's their ideal body weight. Now, do you think there's some people out there that their actual weight is their ideal body weight?
Mhm.
Sure, absolutely. There's also some that their actual body weight is less than their ideal body weight, right? So again, this is all related to their ideal body weight, not actual. Got another hand pop up? No? Okay. All right, so alveolar dead space, I will say this is abnormal. We should not have alveolar dead space. That happens with disease, illness, problems. You know, our anatomical dead space, I know already I have it, and that's not going to change. So I know there's already going to be air that I breathe in that doesn't participate in gas exchange, and that's fine, that's normal. But patients could also have an alveolar dead space, meaning there's volume, there's air inside their alveolus, inside their lung, but it's not coming in contact with blood. If it doesn't come in contact with blood, guess what? No gas exchange. Because this gas exchange I keep referring to, it's gas exchange between the alveoli and the pulmonary capillaries. Giving the pulmonary capillaries oxygen and us taking some carbon dioxide out. And that's continuously happening. And now there's oxygen in the blood. Now we have oxygenated blood carrying that oxygen to the body and to the tissues that need them. So occurs when there is a reduction or decrease in pulmonary blood flow. Again, so the alveoli are getting the air they need, but that alveoli is not getting adequate blood flow. So again, think about these two situations where blood flow is being affected. Someone with a low cardiac output. Now I know I have not yet defined cardiac output, but just so you're aware, cardiac output represents the volume pumped out of the heart per minute. All right, so when you think about the heart squeezing, it's pumping a certain amount of blood volume out each time it squeezes and beats. That cardiac output is how much is being pumped out of the heart per minute. Okay, so if that amount is reduced, that amount is decreased, guess what? I'm not getting as much blood flow going to the body, including going to the lungs. So that can lead to an increase in alveolar dead space. A patient with a pulmonary embolus or embolism, again, doesn't that affect blood flow? A blood clot is not allowing blood to go to this alveolus, and notice what this alveolus shows. It's getting air. The alveolus is not collapsed. It's getting air, except it's wasted. Air getting in there, but it's not participating in gas exchange. So those are a couple of examples of a patient having alveolar dead space. So again, wasted ventilation, total and complete wasted ventilation.
Now, I know porous cone, that's for like the actual air, like the airway, but is there something similar for the capillaries?
Not necessarily, no. So think about this situation for just a second. This is our patient. There's some alveoli that are clearly open, but there's not adequate blood flow going to them for gas exchange to occur. And you give this patient extra supplemental oxygen. Instead of the FiO2 in this alveolus being 21% because they're on room air, you give them 50% oxygen. And so 50% oxygen is in this alveolus. Is that 50% oxygen getting into the bloodstream? No, like I said, wasted ventilation, wasted air. Now, if I increase the FiO2 concentration from 21% to 50% in this one, I can get more oxygen into the bloodstream. So it is still possible I see oxygen levels increase, but it would be in this normal alveolus with normal capillary as opposed to this normal alveolus without adequate blood flow.
Is it still getting oxygen-rich blood to the tissues so that it doesn't die, or?
Maybe, maybe not. It depends how poor the perfusion is. But just recognize there may be some things that we need to do or need to have done from a perfusion perspective, as far as making sure the blood pressure, the blood output, the cardiac output is high enough, or that they've given something to dissolve the blood clot or the embolism here to restore blood flow. All right, so there was three types of dead space: anatomical, alveolar, physiologic. Now, physiologic is simply the sum of both alveolar and anatomical. When you take both of them and put them together, that represents physiological dead space. Again, I can't do anything about our anatomical. It's what we have, what we're born with. But with potential disease or illness, it could increase or affect alveolar dead space. And again, for you and I, do we have any alveolar dead space right now? I hope not, because that's abnormal. It's abnormal. We shouldn't have wasted ventilation. You can see in this particular graph, yeah, they cut blood supply. This is an alveolus that's being ventilated, just not being perfused. All right, quick summary here. So anatomical dead space, we can say it very generically. On average, it's about 150 mLs in the adult patient population, but we want to get more specific, right? It's 1 ml per pound of ideal body weight. Alveolar dead space, again, considered abnormal. That's the volume of air in a non or under-perfused alveoli. And then physiological dead space is both anatomical and alveolar put together, added as one. All right, so going back to minute ventilation again. What was that formula for minute ventilation? Tidal volume times frequency or times respiratory rate? All right. But minute ventilation doesn't tell us how much of that air reached the alveolus. Okay? But thank goodness we have an equation or a way to figure out how much does. Okay? I know, lovely, wonderful, thank you. And we have to know both, of course. All right, so this represents the volume of air entering or leaving the alveoli each minute. Where minute ventilation was what again? Just the volume of air brought in and brought out. Remember, some of that air is in the dead space, our own anatomical dead space area. And we know that volume would not reach the alveolus. Alveolar ventilation does represent the volume of air that does reach the alveolus. It's truly the effective portion of our minute ventilation. That volume that does reach the alveolus does participate in gas exchange. So the formula is almost identical to minute ventilation. All right? There is tidal volume, there is multiplication, and there is the frequency. But what do I have to do first? I have to subtract the dead space. And what dead space this represents is our own anatomical dead space. Take that from the tidal volume, the number you're left with, then you can multiply by the frequency.
So the other dead space, they always gonna be BD2, but then you're gonna say it. then it's gonna
BD
come-
stands for simply dead space, but to get very particular, well, which one are you talking about? Anatomical, physiological, or alveolar? So that needs to be clear. The textbook gets, in my opinion, a little abbreviation happy, and they put some in there, and I'm looking at it going, I understand what the textbook's trying to say by using some of these extra initials after, but it's too, in my opinion, it's too busy. And so I will lay it out and say, no, anatomical dead space, or alveolar dead space, or physiological. I'm taking both of them together. Physiologic. I'm just indicating anatomical dead space. That dead space that we definitely know for each individual patient. Remember this, not all of the minute ventilation reaches the alveoli, because again, part of it is stuck in the conducting airway. So, if this is my tidal volume, let's just say, and it's done this way to make the math simple and math easy. My tidal volume the patient's doing is 450 mLs. And the patient ideal body weight is 150 pounds, meaning 150 mLs is dead space. How much of that 450 reaches the alveolus? Well, you're going to have to do what? Remove 150 from the 450. And how much is left? 300 mLs. It's 300 mLs of that 450 that actually reaches the alveolus to participate in gas exchange. What if, here's grandma again, she's very weak, she can't pull in a lot of air, but what she can pull in, and grandma's 150 pounds ideal body weight too, she's only breathing 150 mLs. Is anything getting into her alveolus? No, because the 150 she's breathing in is only staying in the conducting airway. It's not getting down to the alveolus. And so it's why she is so short of breath, because she's not getting much air down there in the gas exchange zones at all. Question, does increasing the patient's tidal volume, would that increase their alveolar ventilation? If you can make her breathe more than 150, maybe the 450, you would get more volume into her alveolus. Again, you get more of that air into the alveolus so gas exchange could occur. So that is an absolutely 100% yes answer to that question. Increasing the tidal volume does increase alveolar ventilation. What if she was like this? Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead, babe.
So for the equation, the BD is the physiological.
Anatomical.
space?
Anatomical.
Okay.
Let's go with anatomical. That which we know.
Okay.
That which we know. But grandma again, she's only doing 150 mLs, and she's 150 ideal body weight pounds, so nothing's really getting into her alveolus. And rewording this question another way, does increasing one's respiratory rate increase alveolar ventilation? So instead of her breathing 12 times a minute, now she's breathing 30 times a minute. Are you getting more volume in here? You're not. You're not. The only way to improve alveolar ventilation is to increase volume. They need more volume. Again, use her as the example. She's only doing 150 pounds, or only 150 mLs. Sorry, pounds and mLs. She's only doing 150 mLs. So even if she breathes super fast, again, it still is not enough volume to reach her alveolus, because again, it's just getting lost in her conducting airway, never participating in gas exchange.
It's gonna increase the means ventilation, but
It'll
not the
increase-
alveolar.
Correct. It'll increase your minute ventilation, absolutely. When we do the math, sure, that number is gonna increase. But if I'm not getting more volume here, then I'm truly not increasing the volume getting into the alveolus, no matter how fast she breathes. And wouldn't you, if you were only doing this much, wouldn't your body say, yeah, I'm not getting anything in there, you better start breathing faster to try to compensate? And of course it would. And again, wasting energy, because again, this individual just needs more volume. All right, so of course, I got a few things to practice with. Get your calculator ready. So let's just assume, we'll keep it simple. Let's just assume this patient has an ideal body weight of 150 pounds. Okay, 150 pounds is their ideal body weight. The question is, what's their alveolar ventilation, or alveolar minute ventilation even, if their tidal volume is 600 and her frequency is 10? Okay. Do you think on the test, do you think on the exam, I'm going to ask this question. Again, I'm asking for alveolar ventilation. But do you think on the test, I'm going to have an answer that is 6 liters?
Yes.
You know I am. Because I promise you, some people in this room still are going to pick 6 liters, because they're going to take this times this, and oh yeah, 6 is right there. It's one of the answer options. I'm picking 6. And that's not the right answer. If I was asking for just minute ventilation, that would be the correct answer. But here I'm asking for alveolar. So again, what do I have to do with that 150? I have to take that dead, so I have to convert pounds to mLs, which again, very simple conversion here, right? All I'm doing is replacing the pounds to mLs, the same number, right? Because it's 1 ml per pound of body weight. I'm going to take that 150 now mLs and subtract it from what? The 600. Now that difference, and help me here, what number is that? 450. That 450 is the volume that actually gets into the alveolus. That times the frequency is going to tell us what the alveolar ventilation is. So again, double check your math, make sure you're comfortable calculating it. Because I know for a fact I'm going to give you some of these questions whenever we test again, which I don't think is for a couple weeks now. But these are definitely questions I will ask. What about the second one? Tidal volume's 500, frequency's 12. Again, using 150 for all of these, all 3 of these. 4.2. 4.2, okay. Again, 150 from the 500 times the frequency of 12, 4.2.
And it should always be liters, not milliliters.
You will generally find it in liters, yes. I know I'm going to put every one of my answer options in liters, so to save yourself the trouble of trying to convert between mLs and liters. And then the last one, 5.2. Again, subtracting that 150. Now, I know in my example I gave 150 just because it's simple to do, and that's the kind of anatomical dead space number we've mentioned since the beginning. But remember, on the test, on the picture, this number could be different. All right, so make sure you read the test question and find out, is this number different? You know, it might not be 150 on the test question. It may be 140, 160,
We're not gonna do
125.
kilos for us to do pounds and then.
No, not yet, not yet, not yet, that's coming, that's coming in due time. Just to make it easy questions and that much more challenging. And you know, again, in the future, not now, but in the future, I'll tell you the patient is 5'10", 210 pounds, blah, 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 blah. Well, maybe that's not ideal. Maybe that's not their ideal body weight. And so their number would have to be different. It's not necessarily 200 pounds or 200 mLs that I'm subtracting from their volume. Again, not yet, but in time. But in time we'll get there. Taking this and making it a little more advanced. All right, the term hyperventilation and hypoventilation. I'm sure you've heard of it before. And we always associate hyperventilation with someone who is doing what? Breathing fast. Okay? That is partially true. If someone is breathing fast, I don't look at them and go, oh my goodness, they're hyperventilating. No, I'm going to say they are what? They're breathing fast, higher than normal. What's that word? Tachypnea, right? Isn't that the word? Tachypnea. That represents breathing fast. Hyperventilation perhaps could mean the patient is breathing rapidly. I'm not denying that. But it really has to do with their carbon dioxide. And so I really need to know what their CO2 levels are. So if, definition for hyperventilation, if alveolar ventilation, so make sure you're okay with this abbreviation, if alveolar ventilation momentarily removes more CO2 than is being produced, that by definition is hyperventilation. So again, to momentarily remove more CO2, again, how do you have to breathe? Fast, right? I'm making myself hyperventilate. I keep doing that long enough, I'm going to start getting lightheaded. I'm going to really lower my carbon dioxide levels. The opposite is true. For hypoventilation, if alveolar ventilation momentarily removes less CO2 than is being metabolically produced, that by definition is hypoventilation. I will demonstrate. I took one breath. I haven't taken a breath since. There's breath number 2. Still not breathing. I'm still not removing CO2. There's breath number 3. I'm really slowing down my breathing. That could be hypoventilation. But again, what's happening to my carbon dioxide? It's the CO2 that helps me with that definition. My CO2 is going to start to rise if I'm not ventilating at an adequate frequency or at an adequate rate. Remember, because dead space air does not participate in gas exchange, all the CO2 that we exhale came from our alveolus. It didn't come from the dead space, the anatomical dead space, because we really have very little CO2. All that CO2 is coming out of our blood, going back into the alveolus for us to exhale. All right, so same thing, just looking at it a different way. Alveolar ventilation is inversely proportional to alveolar carbon dioxide. If my alveolar ventilation increases, my alveolar CO2 levels will go down. If my alveolar ventilation increases, my alveolar CO2 levels will go down. I'm moving more air. I'm getting rid of that carbon dioxide. If my alveolar ventilation decreases, I'm not moving as much air or as much volume anymore. What's going to happen to my alveolar CO2? It's going to start to rise. So if alveolar ventilation is reduced, alveolar CO2 will start to rise. So assuming blood flow is not affected here, assuming blood flow stays the same, if my alveolar ventilation doubles, my alveolar CO2 levels will be reduced by 1/2. If my alveolar ventilation is cut in half, my alveolar CO2 level will double. So again, alveolar ventilation is important for the simple act of removing carbon dioxide. Isn't carbon dioxide a waste product that we should get rid of, right? Absolutely. Our patients, again, just an aside here, our patients who are not able to ventilate, guess what they purchase from us?
Say that again?
Patients who are not able to remove CO2, patients who don't ventilate well enough, patients who don't ventilate well enough, patients don't ventilate well enough, that have these increasing levels of carbon dioxide, guess what they end up purchasing from us? Not oxygen, not the CO2 things, even though we probably use them. A mechanical ventilator, right? The ventilator to help them do what? Increase ventilation, increase alveolar ventilation. So again, so think about every one of those patients in the hospital right now who are on a ventilator. They probably had to be placed on a ventilator because they couldn't maintain adequate alveolar ventilation. And what happened to their carbon dioxide levels? Started to rise. So that's why they needed the ventilator that we're managing to help bring those carbon dioxide levels down. By helping them do what? Be able to ventilate more effectively. All right, so question. I may have already spoiled this. All right, what does it mean if the patient's breathing 35 times a minute, but their CO2 levels are normal? And to help define here, sorry, I don't mean to jump ahead to some things we haven't fully answered yet. This CO2 level represents arterial, bloodstream CO2. Okay, I know the big A we had before represented alveolar, but this is carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. Okay. So, patients breathing 35 times a minute, which is higher than normal, agreed? Okay. Their CO2 levels are normal. Are they technically hyperventilating, true or false? Yes, no. False is the correct answer. They are tachypnic, right? They are breathing fast, but usually someone who's breathing fast, what happens to their CO2 levels? They go down, right? Breathing fast, I'm eliminating lots of CO2. This person is breathing fast, but their CO2 levels are normal. Okay? What that tells us is they're working really hard just to keep things normal. Again, maybe it's the age of the patient, maybe it's the health or athleticism of the patient, but are you going to be able to breathe 35 times a minute for the next 24 to 48 hours to keep your CO2 levels normal? At some point, no. And I don't care how healthy we are or how in shape we are. At some point, we're going to do what? We're going to fail. And we're just not going to be able to keep that pace anymore. Okay, so what something like this is telling us, more than likely, the volumes they're breathing in are probably too small. So to try to compensate, they're trying to breathe more rapidly. Okay, and right now they're able to do that enough to keep their CO2 levels normal. But like I said, at some point, again, the younger the patient's probably going to last longer than the older patient, but at some point, regardless of how young or otherwise healthy they are, at some point they're going to fail and not be able to maintain that fast pace to keep their CO2 levels normal. I'm sorry, did I see a hand?
Does your CO2 get wonky with like exercising if you're breathing so hard?
Surprisingly, no. Now, if we exercise, our tissues are going to produce more what? CO2, carbon dioxide. However, when we're exercising, what happens to our respiratory rate? Goes up to compensate for that extra CO2 in our body so we can get rid of it and not be affected by elevated carbon dioxide. So when we, and what happens to our heart? Goes up, again, to help move that blood from the tissues that just release that carbon dioxide back to the lungs so I can exhale it. Any other? All right, let's change thoughts for a second. There is a calculation, shocker, is a calculation where we can find out the ratio of dead space to tidal volume. Dead space to tidal volume. They call it the BT ratio, dead space to tidal volume ratio. It represents what percentage of the tidal volume is dead space. And if you say, well, what dead space, John? Anatomical, alveolar, physiologic, all of it. Physiologic. So yes, part of this is going to be anatomical for you and I, but my sick patient who has still their own anatomical dead space, but maybe has more because of disease or illness, alveolar dead space, I will notice a different number here. Now, ours is around 30 to 40%, meaning 30 to 40% of our normal tidal volume is wasted. Part of our own anatomical dead space. If we breathe shallow, that will actually increase our VDVT, which is not a good thing. Leads to a greater percentage of wasted or dead space ventilation. Whereas breathing deeper, tidal volumes anyways, will decrease VDVT. And again, we can't change our own anatomical dead space, that's a constant. And everybody's excited because here's the question, here's the equation. Okay? You can calculate it, but praying sometimes helps. I heard of Jesus mention, yes, sometimes praying helps. So VDVT can be calculated if I know the exhaled carbon dioxide level, exhaled carbon dioxide amount. And I also have to have their arterial carbon dioxide levels. So with this, there's information I have to be able to obtain. Okay? I have to have arterial blood to be able to measure arterial CO2 levels, and I do have to be able to measure exhaled CO2. Okay? So those are things that in any sort of test question, John will provide. I will give those in the test question. I will give you those numbers. You just have to know how to put the numbers together. Okay? So to figure out the VDVT, and so what does VDVT represent again? The percentage of the tidal volume that is wasted, that is dead space. Normal is what again? 30 to 40%, that's me and you. So you would simply take the arterial CO2, subtract it from the exhaled CO2, and then divide that by the arterial CO2. I know over the years some students have said it's PACO minus PECO over PACO. That's actually brilliant because it's a little thing you'll remember if you say it out. Sounds silly in the beginning, but like, oh, that's going to help me when I answer the formula. How many times are you saying PACO versus PECO? Sometimes folks will get the E's and the A's mixed up, okay? Otherwise known as the Bohr equation, fitting, not the most exciting formula in the world, but Bohr equation. If you're curious where we get exhaled CO2 from, it can be from a process known as capnography or capnometry, where we can actually get a measurement for exhaled CO2. It's not that, this one's not that bad. I'll be honest with you when the time comes going, yeah, this is a toughie. This one's not that bad, okay? I will say, and I'm not trying to minimize your pain because I know I see it every year from a new group of first year students hearing this stuff for the first time. The minute ventilation worksheet I left on the table here the other day, second year students saw it. Did I tell you this already? Yeah, they sound like, oh, I wish we could go back to that, because they know what's in your future. And now it gets harder than that. All right, so let's do this. Here's the test question. Here's the test. I'm telling you right now. This is the question I'm going to give you on the test. Only thing I'm going to change is the numbers. Okay, only thing I'm going to change is the numbers. But everything else about it is going to be the same. Question is, what is the VDVT of a patient if their arterial CO2 is 40 millimeters of mercury and their exhaled CO2 is 30 millimeters of mercury? That's the formula up here. Now, the formula won't appear on the test, obviously. I'm not going to give you the formula. But you'll have to figure that out. Yes? Yes.
I'll just go the answer.
Okay, hold on, let me have an opportunity. I posted the question ahead of time. You did that last time. Alright, so just give you a chance to kind of punch in numbers. Just make sure your answer is what the answer we're going to have here.
I think I did this already. Yeah, I did.
Okay, everybody have an opportunity. So So what is it? It's 40 minus 30 divided by 40, right? 40 minus 30 divided by 40. Coincidentally, I gave it to you in the right order. Test question wise, I could flip it. I can give you exhaled CO2, then arterial CO2. So don't always assume it's just going to be this minus this divided by that. No, I can reverse the order. And you know I can give you other things that are not necessary to solve this. I tell you the FiO2 is this, our heart rate is that, the respiratory rate is this. It has nothing to do with what I'm asking. All right, so just be careful. So what's the answer? 0.25, okay, 0.25 or simply 25%. So of that tidal volume, 25% of this individual's tidal volume is dead space. 25% is dead space. Everybody okay with the math? 0.25, same thing as 25%. If you want to take this number times 100, so it looks right on the calculator, it says 25 on the calculator, then more power to you. If that works for you, then by all means do it. So that's 25%. So it tells me 25% of my patient's tidal volume is wasted. Here's question number 2. If they have a tidal volume of 500, how much of that volume is dead space? If their tidal volume is 500, how much of that then is dead space? Isn't it? It's 25% of 500, right? 125 mLs. Okay, where did I get that number from? If their tidal volume was 500, 25% of that 500 is 125 mLs. So that 125 represents what again? That is their dead space. That is their dead space. Based on our calculation, knowing arterial and exhaled carbon dioxide levels.
Are you gonna ever give us the dead space and ask us like what's the exhaled or something?
Working backwards, no. No, that wouldn't happen. Because this is the stuff we're gonna get on the front end, not where we're at to figure out what this is after. Okay? Everybody, yeah, so, I'm seeing some questionable faces. Thank goodness I asked another question. Alright, so, what's the VDVT for this situation? The arterial CO2 is 60, exhaled CO2 is 28. What is their VDVT?
For these type of things on tests, would you want to put the second decimal point or the third?
Yeah, it'd be okay to round. Absolutely. Yeah, so the equation then is 60 minus 28 divided by 60. Like I said, I gave it to you in the proper order. Just remember on the test, I could reverse the order. And when I do that, yes, I'm going to do that math to come up with the wrong answer. If you just start randomly going, I know I got to add this or subtract this and divide this, I do the same thing to come up with my wrong answers. So I know sometimes you're like, I'm just going to do some subtraction, division. Oh, there's an answer, I'm picking it. Yeah, I did the same thing. That's how I got that wrong answer. So make sure you know what you're doing. So what's the answer here? About 53%. Okay, 60 minus 28 divided by 60, about 53%. Are you okay with that one? Bonus question or follow-up question. What if they have a tidal volume of 600? If their tidal volume is 600, how much of that volume is dead space? 320? 318?
I have the elongated.
I got you. Yeah, see, I didn't. Alright, so then 53% of 600 is about 318-ish. And I have that question on a test. I'll make sure answer options. So what Jeremy did was that, what was it, 52 point, yeah. And he just kept going with his calculator. But on the test answer, I'm probably just gonna call it 53, and then when I ask this question, I'm using 0.53 instead of 0.525, whatever it rounded up to be. But your answer options, I won't have answer options 318, 319, 320. They won't be that close. They'll be spread far enough apart that even if you did not or did round, and I didn't or did not round, you'd still be able to be close enough to the right answer. But I know, because it drives me crazy, I want it to read right. I want it to read exactly what I got, the number that is on the test. Sharon, did you have, was that hand going up?
Oh, no.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. All right, any questions on this? This is week 6? Week 6, I think? Who knows at this point? Wait till week 8, wait till week 10. You got to do it. Week 7 even, for that matter. All right, so last part here is just trying to rehash what we've talked about before. This was actually from the textbook, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of use it as an example. So, showing that rate and depth of ventilation can affect someone's alveolar ventilation. Could also in turn then affect someone's VDVT. This example is taking identical minute ventilation values and then comparing them to 3 different kind of patient situations, but all using the same fundamental minute ventilation. Before I get to the numbers here, just to make sure terminology we're okay, tachypnea, faster respiratory rate above normal. Opposite would be bradypnea, respiratory rates below normal. The term hypopnea represents shallow breathing. Our patients with sleep apnea, if they don't go fully apneic, they tend to have hypopnea episodes. And then hyperpnea, the exact opposite from hypopnea, deep breathing, moving in larger volumes. Okay, so going back to this. And this example, this shows a patient who has a tidal volume of 250, that's what they're doing, 250 mLs. They're breathing 32 times a minute, has a minute ventilation, again this is from the textbook, of 8 milliliters, or what John would say, 8 liters. Okay, all I'm doing is putting the 0.25 here, and this is coming out to be an 8 liters. But that's the minute ventilation. When we look at this patient, and again, they don't give it to you anywhere on here, but let's use the old adage, their anatomical dead space is 150 mLs. Okay? So if I take 150 mLs from this, what am I left with here? 100. That's the volume that's getting into the alveolus to participate in gas exchange. How many times is the patient breathing? What is their frequency? 32. That's where they're coming up with this number for the patient's alveolar ventilation. Their alveolar ventilation. I've added my piece to it. You're welcome to take a picture of that if you want, because I love my numbers to be in liters here. So the 250 minus 150, those are mLs, times the frequency of 32, gives you an alveolar ventilation of 3.2. Okay? Now the next couple of slides, we're going to compare those values or that information to what we just showed here. Okay? I'll leave that up there for a second as they need it. So would you agree? This volume is kind of small. We're talking adult patient, but the frequency is quite fast, quite rapid.
So in that case, like the gas, the blood gas will show if it's working, the compressor mechanism, or not yet.
Well, it will tell us how well the patient is able to ventilate. Yeah, sorry it's all the way to the bottom, guys. Sorry. I can always go back if anybody needs a picture or take a look at it later. But let's compare. So this is where we're starting. Now remember what we said about alveolar ventilation. What really improves alveolar ventilation? I'll make it a 50-50. Breathing faster or breathing with a larger tidal volume? Breathing deeper, larger tidal volume. So let's just compare. So now I'm gonna switch it up. Now the volume is 500. Frequency is less than the 32 it was previously, but notice the minute ventilation is still the exact same. But look how much more air went into the alveolus to participate in gas exchange. Again, if you want your answer to look in liters, there you go. So 500 minus the 150 times that frequency of 16 gives us an alveolar ventilation of 5.6. Before it was what, 3.2? When their tidal volume was only 250, but their rate was 32 times a minute. Their alveolar ventilation is much better here with the improvement in volume. One more example, and this is an extreme example, but just to make it make sense. Now the tidal volume's 1,000. It's 1 full liter. They're only breathing 8 times a minute. Notice the minute ventilation is still the same. So for all 3 examples, minute ventilation has been 8. Only thing that's changed is the tidal volume seemed to get a little higher, and the respiratory rate seemed to get a little lower, each one of these. When I calculate alveolar ventilation, I get 6.8 or 6,800 mLs. Again, the way to improve an individual patient's alveolar ventilation is to have them do what? Breathe deeper, breathe more volume. And that's easier said than done, because I know sometimes patients are so weak that they can't. But maybe there's things we can provide, we can assist them with to help them pull in some more volume. You wonder why I split these chapters up into 2 parts and not all in the same setting. Can you imagine if I did minute ventilation, alveolar ventilation, and BDVT all in the same class session? Yeah, you guys start throwing things at me. All right, so with normal breathing, normal, regular, spontaneous breathing, let's carry a fancy word here, eupnea. Eupnea, I don't think I've ever said that in practice before. When somebody says, how's the patient? Oh, they eupnea, they're pretty good. Somebody's gonna go, yoo-hoo. But academically, in the textbooks, eupnea simply means normal breathing. You may see that word on a board exam question. And if I didn't mention it enough or make fun of it enough, you're like, I don't remember what that word is. I know it was said one time and that's about it. But with normal, regular breathing, we can maintain a normal alveolar CO2 level. Now, what happens when my patient is hyperventilating, and how does one hyperventilate? It means they can increase their breathing frequency, or increase their depth of breathing, or some sort of combination of the two. In this example, they're still breathing 500, but they're breathing a lot more rapid. Here, they're not breathing quite as rapid, but they're breathing much deeper. What does that do? So, if alveolar ventilation increases, what happens to alveolar CO2 levels? They will decrease, they will go down. They're inversely related, right? If alveolar ventilation increases, alveolar CO2 levels will decrease. And again, I'm this way. I have to do it or see it or feel it. If I start breathing rapidly and or deep, what am I doing to my CO2? Getting rid of it, right? As opposed to the exact opposite, where I really start to slow down or start to breathe shallow or some combination of the two. I'm not breathing as much or breathing as deeply. What happens with the CO2? It starts to go up. It starts to increase. Question? I know it's complicated information, but we'll get through it. We'll get through it. It's only gonna get more complicated. I wish I could say it gets easier. It's one of these things. We're a real nice bell curve, you know, where we start to, okay, there's nothing new to add. It's a matter of just kind of hammering home the stuff we've been learning and practicing and making sure you can remember it and retain it. But it wouldn't be me if it wasn't time for another worksheet. I know I tried to sneak this in with my stuff that nobody saw. Alright, so, as I hand it to you, you can work that again. This is yours to keep. We'll go over it to make sure you have the right answers, but I'm not collecting this. This is completely yours.
Change the setting on your screen to go on.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You have an air, right?
No,
Yeah,
but
you
they're
have
the
a
same.
pro. What is it?
I had it there. I like the Pro. It does have a few more things, but I mean, Air did everything needed.
Yeah.
But I sold it to someone.
You're welcome.
By the way, another thing with these is, do you color it have like the outdoor thing?
Oh yeah, I have that.
Do you have it too?
It comes on the Pro.
Alright, so go ahead, have at it. There's only 5 questions.
Only.
Only 5 questions. questions on the back page too? A little bit in front. I know some of you guys might not be done yet, but let's go ahead and just kind of talk through some of these, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. So, the first one says calculate the alveolar minute ventilation for the following patient. The patient's anatomical dead space is 150 mLs. Their tidal volume is 550, their frequency is 12. What is their alveolar ventilation in this example? We're supposed to say something. What is it? 4.8. Okay, 4.8. So make sure you're comfortable with where that math, where those numbers came from. So subtracting the anatomical dead space from the tidal volume, and then multiplying that by the frequency. And like I said, I know I've said this many times, and I apologize if it's boring now. I could give you more information here that's not necessary, right? I could give you additional numbers that are doing nothing to what I'm asking, okay? So just don't fall for that trick when it happens. Question number 2, okay, let's put these together, sorry. Number 2 says alveolar minute ventilation for the following patient. Their anatomical dead space is 130. So make sure you pay attention there. We're not using 150, we're using 130 now. Tidal volume is 300, frequency 16. What is their alveolar ventilation?
2.7.
That's what I heard. So I think what came out was 2.72 or something close to there, right? Something close to there. So subtracting the anatomical dead space from the tidal volume first, then multiplying that number by their frequency. Again, 2.72. And I'd probably leave it like that on the test just so it's clear. I may call it 2.7, but I think you would still see what the right answer is. Second question says calculate the minute ventilation for the following patient. Their anatomical dead space is 150, tidal volume 650, and frequency is 10. What was your answer there?
5.
Did I get 5? Did I hear 5? Did I hear 5?
Yes.
Okay, because option A on the test is going to be 5.
Okay.
6.5? Okay, sure? Because the answer, option A on the test is going to be 5. And 5 is going to be the wrong answer, because you got the right answer. It was 6.5. What did I do on this one? I simply asked for VE, where you did not need to know the dead space. Alright? Guys, I promise you, I'm giving you my tricks. Right? And here, haha, I got you now. Don't let me get you on the test. Right? So, I gave you this, and notice, I did it in a series. I waited until you got 3 questions in, you kind of got used to the order here, and you were already subtracting, not everybody, but subtracting this from this, which would give you 500. 500 times 10 would that be 5 liters. That's the answer if I ask for alveolar ventilation, but I simply ask for minute ventilation. So don't, in this example, don't worry about the 150. It's, bless you, tidal volume times frequency. Right? I promise you on the test, I'm going to do the same thing. I may get you set up for, because I'm asking maybe in a row or pretty close to in a row, minute ventilation, then I throw in alveolar, and then I ask another minute ventilation question, so pay attention. Is it alveolar ventilation? And I will give you the abbreviations. Is it VA or is it VE I'm looking for? One I have to subtract the dead space from. The other one, I don't have to do anything with the dead space. So don't let me trick you on the test. Please don't let me trick you on the test. And don't let the NBRC trick you either. They'll do the same thing to you guys. Alright, everybody okay with these for now? Alright, the next one was a VDVT question. Patient has an arterial CO2 of 30 and an exhaled CO2 of 18. What is their VDVT? So what's the calculation? PaCO2 minus PeCO2 divided by PaCO2. The PaCO minus PeCO over PaCO. What was the answer here? About 40%? Okay, I like it. 40%. Any issues with this one? Next one. So this is question number 5. So this is the last one. Their CO2 is 75, arterial CO2 is 75, exhaled CO2 is 34. What's the patient's VDVT? We'll worry about the next half of the question in just a second. But first off, what's their VDVT? So it's 75 minus 34 divided by 75, which comes out to be about 55%. I rounded up to call it 55% too, right? Make sure you're okay with your math. Make sure. Can you trust your calculator? If you're like me, I buy the cheap calculator and I look at it later and it has 2 6s. I'm like, oh great. You know, can I trust the answer it's going to give me? So like I said, in this activity, I don't care that you use your phone, that's fine. But on the test, you're going to have a calculator, regular, standard, basic calculator, not your cell phone. All right, so everybody okay with the 55? All right. Second half of this question says, if they have a time on the 450, how much actually reaches the alveoli? What did you say? 160, say that? 165, okay, do I hear another 165? 247? 0.5? Okay. Somebody get a totally different number? Go ahead, say something.
247.
247, okay. Well, we know 55% of that 450 is what? Is dead space. That's not the answer to the question, however. Okay, that's the dead space number. Okay, that is 55% of this is 247.5 or 248 if I round up, right? That's the dead space. But what did the question ask? How much of that 450 actually reaches the alveoli? What we've solved here is the part that did not reach the alveoli. So how much reaches the alveoli? I have to take that and subtract it from the 450. 202.5, thereabouts. And you're more than welcome to take pictures of these guys if it helps. But here's my test question. Answer options. Option A, for what's being asked, is that. Am I going to get a fair share of people picking that as an answer? Yes, absolutely. Then I will. Right? So pay attention to what I'm asking for. If I rephrase this just like I did during the lecture, and I simply want to know, well, what's dead space? How much volume is then wasted, or how much volume is dead space? That 247 number is the right answer. But if I take it a step further and say, well, of that 450, how much reaches the alveolus? That's that 202, 203 number. So be careful. Don't let me trick you. Don't let me trick you. Can you imagine if we didn't do this? I just saved it and I held it. Well, I can't wait for the test. I know what everybody's gonna. I know which is gonna be the majority question everybody gets wrong, right? But we talked about it. Now, again, that was only here. Only one question on that worksheet that I gave you. But look back at that. Make sure I don't trip you up when it's time for the test. Now, next week, one more. No questions, but one more. I think this may how you feel. Maybe that bar is a little bit lower on the progress meter. But next week, this is chapter 4. Next week we'll begin chapter 7, which is on diffusion. It's related. It kind of flows with what we're talking about, moving into the next area. But gas diffusion. This is the part that, just like we talked about before, we know how much oxygen in millimeters of mercury is in the room. We know how much is in the airway. We know it's less because of moisture. Next week, we'll talk about how much is now in the alveolus, oxygen-wise, O2-wise. And so that's part of chapter 7. So next week, we'll do chapter 7. The week after, we do chapter 8. The week after that is when we test. So chapters 4, 7, and 8. So it's going to still be a couple weeks before we test again. Please don't forget the stuff we talked about here. Minute ventilation, alveolar ventilation, VDVT, those sort of things, the 3 types of dead space, anatomical, alveolar, physiologic. So make sure you keep going back and reviewing that when we start adding new information. You'll notice when I start posting the PowerPoints for this are not going to be exceptionally long, similar to what we've done today. And part of it is because the content part of it is heavy. It doesn't require umpteen slides to review that stuff. But make sure you're reviewing this stuff so you're somewhat comfortable with it So when we start adding new stuff to it, you're not gonna be struggling the night before, a couple days before the test, trying to go back and review all this stuff to keep it current, okay? Then I'll go ahead and spoil my surprise. Yeah, there's gonna be a few more formulas and a few more worksheets, that will continue next week. Is there any questions? You guys look spent. You guys look beaten up. All right, so what are we doing Friday? Lab Friday. We get to do what Friday? Intubate. And Jeremy, I'm so happy you stepped up for both groups to let us intubate. But no, so make sure you're there on time Friday, because we're going to get going. We're going to carry a tight schedule because we want to make sure you have plenty of time to do your intubation practice. There's some of you guys that are going to be like, I'm frustrated, I'm mad because I've attempted it 3 or 4 times and I still haven't gotten it. It's okay, you'll get it. It's just going to take time. It's going to take time to practice to get more comfortable with it. But remember things we're not going to be doing. We're not going to be breaking teeth because we're not going to be rocking our wrist. We're going to be lifting straight up to the ceiling, straight up to the far corner of the wall, right? We're not going to do this. I almost wish I could give you one of those bowling braces, you know, so it locks your wrist into position. You're going to have to get used to doing this and not rocking on the teeth. Even though it's mannequins, guess what you can still do? You can still break their teeth. So again, I don't want to have a bunch of broken teeth mannequins. Looks kind of funny. What are we doing over here? Everybody has their front 2 teeth. We intubated, sorry. So just be ready for Friday. Make sure you're here on time. Like I said, tight schedule. We want to show you some of the stuff first, and then save the rest of the time for you to be able to intubate. Okay. So any questions before I let you guys run? Oh, okay. I'll see you all on Friday.